Chapter 2: Image, Values and Identity. In mental dynamics, we need to know something about how and why the mind functions. In mental dynamics, it is urgent to know something about the how and why of the different functionalisms of the mind. A realistic system is needed if we truly want to know the potential of the human mind. We need to improve the quality of values, identity and image of ourselves. I think that a change of values, image and identity is fundamental. The intellectual animal, mistakenly called man, has educated himself to deny his authentic identity, values and image. To accept the negative culture subjectively installed in our mind, in our interior, following the path of least resistance, is absurd. We need an objective culture. To accept just like that, following the line of least resistance, the subjective culture of this decadent era, is unquestionably absurd. We need to undergo a total revolution and a definitive change in this matter of image, values and identity. The exterior image of man, and the diverse circumstances that surround him, are the exact result of his exterior image and of his psychological processes. Self-image is different, it is the inner KM. The cosmic man, the cosmos man, our divine prototype, the real being. Image, values and identity should be changed radically. This is integral revolution. We need the identity of the being, values of the being and image of the being. If we discover the reserves of intelligence contained in the mind, we can liberate it. The reserves of intelligence are the different parts of the being which orient us in the work related with the disintegration of the ego and with the liberation of the mind. The reserves of intelligence, contained in the mind, orient us in the work related with the liberation of the mind. The values of the being constitute the intelligence. The reserves of intelligence are the diverse parts of the being that guide and orient us in the psychological work related to the annihilation of the ego and the liberation of the mind. Let us always make a differentiation between mind and being. When someone accepts that the mind is bottled up in the ego, it indicates that he has begun to mature. In the matter of the dissolution of the ego, it is necessary to combine structural and transactional analysis. Only the values of the intelligence can liberate the mind through the disintegration of the undesirable psychic elements. Self-criticism. We should be sincere with our own selves and dissect the I with a tremendous scalpel of self-criticism. It is absurd to criticize the errors of others. What is fundamental is to discover our own errors and then disintegrate them on the basis of analysis and profound comprehension. It is only possible to act collectively when each individual is capable of acting individually with full and absolute consciousness of what is being done. The systems of the revolution of the dialectic will seem very lengthy to impatient people. However, another way does not exist. Those who want fast and immediate changes, in the psychological and social order, create rigid norms, dictatorships of the mind. They do not aspire to others knowing how to think but rather dictate what has to be thought. Every abrupt change defrauds its own objective and man becomes a victim once again of that which he struggled against. Within our own selves are all the causes of the failure of any organization. Self-image. This matter of identifying, imagining and valuing oneself correctly, should not be confused with the marvelous doctrine of non-identification. Instead of retaining in our mind a senile and degenerated culture, we need to re-educate ourselves. We need to have an exact concept about our own selves. Each person has a false concept about himself. It is undelayable to re-encounter our own selves, to auto-know, re-educate and re-evaluate ourselves correctly. The mind bottled up within the ego ignores the authentic values of the being. How could the mind recognize what it has never known? Mental freedom is only possible by liberating the mind. The false concepts bottle up the mind. The exterior is merely the reflection of the interior. The image of a man gives origin to his exterior image. The exterior is the mirror where the interior is reflected. Any person is the result of his own mental processes. Human thoughts are 99% negative and harmful. Self-adoration. In the interaction in society exists self-discovery, self-revelation. Really, when the mind is in alert perception during interaction, the hidden defects flourish, leap forward, then we see them as they are in ourselves. All of us human beings, deep within, are narcissists in love with our own selves. Observe a singer on the theater stage. He is madly in love with himself, he adores, idolizes himself, and when applause pours on him, he reaches the climax of his self-adoration, for that is precisely what he wants, what he aspires to, what he awaits with infinite thirst. Really, vanity is the living manifestation of self-esteem. The I adorns itself in order for others to adore it. When the ego begins to control the personality of the child, spontaneous beauty disappears. Then the overestimation of the beloved is initiated and the child dreams with dominating the world and becoming the most powerful person of the earth. Self-judgment. The man who permits that which is called self-judgment or inner judgment to express itself in a spontaneous manner within him will be guided by the voice of the conscience, and he will march on the straight path. Every man who is subjected to self-judgment, in fact, becomes by his own right a good citizen, a good husband, a good missionary, a good parent, etc. In order to know our inner contradictions, it is necessary to auto-discover ourselves. The one who discovers himself can work with success in the dissolution of the pluralized I. Inner contradictions are based on the plurality of the I. The tremendous contradictions that we carry within make our lives painfully bitter. We are laborers, and we want to be potentates. Soldiers, and we want to be generals. We think of acquiring our own house, and once we have obtained it, we sell it because it tires us and we want another one. We are content with nothing. We seek happiness in ideas, and they too march in file and pass. We seek happiness in interaction with friends who are with us today and against us tomorrow. We see, therefore, that everything is illusory. Nothing in life can give us happiness. With so many contradictions, we are wretched persons. It is necessary to put an end to the pluralized I. It is only in this manner that we can put an end to the secret origin of all of our contradictions and bitterness. Those who have already dissolved the I, in fact, possess the PCC. In the world there exist many schools and systems, and many people who live like butterflies, flitting from school to school, always full of inner contradictions, always dissatisfied, always seeking the path, and they do not find it, even when it is very close to their eyes. The pluralized I does not let them see the path of truth and life. The worst enemy of illumination is the I. A master was asked, "What is the way?" "What a magnificent mountain," he said about the mountain where he had his retreat. "I do not ask you about the mountain, but rather about the way. As long as you cannot go beyond the mountain, you will not be able to find the way," replied the master. The I can also do good deeds and gain many merits which improve its psychological character, but it will never be able to reach illumination. We should seek illumination, for everything else shall be added unto us. It is impossible to reach illumination without having the PCC. It is impossible to have a permanent center of consciousness without having dissolved the pluralized I. The self-idea, intellectual information and others' ideas, is not experience. Erudition is not experimentation. The exclusively three-dimensional rehearsal, test or demonstration is not unitotal. Opinions, concepts, theories and hypotheses do not mean verification, experimentation, full consciousness about this or that phenomena. There must exist a faculty that is superior than the mind, one that is independent of the intellect, that is capable of giving us direct experience and knowledge about any phenomena. It is only by liberating ourselves from the mind that we can truly experience that which is real, that which exists in a potential state behind any phenomena. The world is nothing more but an illusory mental form which will inevitably dissolve at the end of the great cosmic day. I, myself, your body, my friends, things, my family, etc. are in the end that which the Hindus call Maya, illusion, vain mental forms which will be reduced to cosmic dust sooner or later. My affections, the most beloved beings which surround me, etc. are simple forms of the cosmic mind. They do not have real existence. Intellectual dualism, such as pleasure and pain, praises and insults, victory and defeat, wealth and misery, constitute the painful mechanism of the mind. Auto-idea and true happiness cannot exist within us as long as we are slaves of the mind. Nobody can develop the auto-idea and true happiness as long as he is a slave of the mind. That which is real is not a matter of textual assumptions or other people's ideas, but rather of direct experience. Whoever frees himself from the intellect can experience and feel an element which transforms radically. When we free ourselves of the mind, the latter then becomes a ductile, elastic, useful vehicle, by means of which we express ourselves. Superior logic invites us to think that to emancipate oneself from the mind is in fact equivalent to awakening consciousness, to putting an end to automatism. But let us get down to brass tacks. Who or what is it that should get away from others' mortifying ideas? It is obvious to answer these questions by saying the conscience, that which is part of the soul in us, is what can and should liberate itself. Others' ideas of pseudo-literature only serve to make our existence bitter. Authentic happiness is only possible when we emancipate ourselves from the intellect. However, we should recognize that a major inconvenience for that aspired liberation of consciousness exists. I want to refer to the tremendous battle of the antithesis. The essence or conscience, unfortunately, lives bottled up within the exaggerated intellective dualism of the opposites, yes and no, good and evil, tall and short, mine and yours, pleasure and displeasure, pleasure and pain, etc. It is clearly brilliant to comprehend in depth that when the tempest of borrowed ideas in the ocean of the mind ceases and the struggle of the opposites ends, the essence escapes, submerges itself in that which is real and emanates the auto-idea, the seed idea with all its splendor. Chapter 3. Mo, Chao. The Chinese word mo means silent or serene. Chao means to reflect or to observe. Mo Chao, therefore, can be translated as serene reflection or serene observation. The difficult, laborious, arduous and painful thing is to achieve absolute mental silence in all the levels of the subconscious. To reach stillness and silence in the mere superficial intellectual level or in a few subconscious departments is not sufficient because the essence continues bottled up within a submerged, infraconscious and unconscious dualism. A blank mind is something too superficial, empty and intellectual. We need serene reflection if we truly want to achieve the absolute stillness and silence of the mind. However, it is clear to comprehend that in pure Gnosticism the terms serenity and reflection have much more profound meanings and hence should be comprehended within their special connotations. The feeling of serene transcends that which is normally understood by calm or tranquility. It implies a superlative state which is beyond reasoning, desires, contradictions and words. It designates a situation which is beyond worldly noise. Likewise, the meaning of reflection is beyond what is understood as contemplation of a problem or idea. Here it does not imply mental activity or contemplative thinking, but rather a kind of clear and reflexive objective consciousness, always enlightened in its own experience. Therefore, serene, in this context, is the serenity of non-thinking, and reflection means intense and clear consciousness. Serene reflection is clear consciousness and the tranquility of non-thinking. When perfect serenity reigns, one achieves true, profound enlightenment. Dispersed mind and integral mind. In mental dynamics, it is urgent to know how and why the mind functions. It is only by resolving how and why that we can make of the mind a useful instrument. Intellectual liberty is only possible on the basis of understanding, comprehension and knowledge of the different functionalisms of the mind. It is only by knowing the diverse mechanisms of the mind that we free ourselves from the mind in order to make of it a useful instrument. It is undelayable to know ourselves if in reality we want to control our own mind in an integral manner. Hippocrates, the great physician, was one of the classical masters of the mind. The human mind is conditioned. Will without change is only possible by dissolving the ego. The mind should become an obedient mechanism to man. Maturity begins when we accept the reality that the human mind is conditioned. It is possible to achieve the liberation of the mind if we discover the intelligence it possesses. We need an integral mind instead of a dispersed mind. The revolution of meditation. The technique of meditation permits us to arrive at the heights of illumination and the revolution of the dialectic. We should distinguish between a mind that is still and a mind that is stilled by force. When the mind is stilled by force, it is really not still. It is gagged by violence, and in the deeper levels of understanding, there is an entire tempest. When the mind is silenced violently, it is really not in silence and deep within, it clamors, shouts and despairs. it is necessary to put an end to modifications of the thinking principle during meditation. When the thinking principle remains under our control, illumination comes to us spontaneously. Mental control permits us to destroy the shackles created by the mind. To achieve the stillness and silence of the mind, it is necessary to know how to live from instant to instant, to know how to take advantage of each moment, to not live the moment in doses. Take everything from each moment, because each moment is a child of gnosis. Each moment is absolute, alive and significant. Momentaneity is a special characteristic of the Gnostics. We love the philosophy of momentaneity. Master Imam said to his disciples, "If you walk, walk. If you sit, sit, but do not vacillate." A first study in the technique of meditation is the antechamber of that divine peace that surpasses all knowledge. The most elevated form of thinking is non-thinking. When one achieves the stillness and silence of the mind, the I with all its passions, desires, appetites, fears, affections, etc., becomes absent. It is only in the absence of the I, in the absence of the mind, that the Buddhata can awaken to unite with the inner self and take us to ecstasy. It is false, as is pretended by the school of black magic of the Subha, that the monad or the great reality will penetrate in him who does not possess the superior existential bodies of the being. What enters in the tenebrous fanatics of the Subha are the tenebrous entities that are expressed in them with gestures, actions, bestial and absurd words. Those people are possessed by the tenebrous ones. The stillness and silence of the mind has a single objective: liberate the essence from the mind so that fused with the monad or inner self, it, the essence, can experience that which we call the truth. During ecstasy and in the absence of the I, the essence can live freely in the world of the mist of fire, experiencing the truth. When the mind is in a passive and receptive state, absolutely still and in silence, the essence or Buddhata is liberated from the mind and ecstasy arrives. The essence is always bottled up in the battle of the opposites, but when the battling ends and the silence is absolute, the essence remains free and the bottle broken into pieces. When we practice meditation, our mind is assaulted by many memories, desires, passions, preoccupations, etc. We should avoid the conflict between attention and abstraction. A conflict exists between distraction and attention when we combat those assailants of the mind. The I is the projector of said mental assailants. Where there is conflict, stillness and silence do not exist. We should nullify the projector through self-observation and comprehension. Examine each image, each memory, each thought that comes to the mind. Remember that every thought has two poles, positive and negative. Entering and leaving are two aspects of a same thing. The dining room and the bathroom, tall and short, pleasant and unpleasant, etc., are always two poles of the same thing. Examine the two poles of each mental form that comes to the mind. Remember that only through the study of these polarities one arrives at the synthesis. Every mental form can be eliminated through the synthesis. Example: the memory of a fiancée assaults us. Is she beautiful? Let us think that beauty is the opposite of ugliness and that if, in her youth she is beautiful, in her old age, she will be ugly. The synthesis: it is not worth it to think about her. She is an illusion, a flower that inevitably withers. In India, this self-observation and study of our psyche is properly called pratyahara. Bird-like thoughts should pass through the space of our own mind in a successive parade but without leaving any trace. The infinite procession of thoughts projected by the I, in the end are exhausted and then the mind remains still and in silence. A great self-realized master said, only when the projector, in other words, the I, is completely absent, then befalls the silence which is not a product of the mind. The silence is inexhaustible, it is not of time, it is the immeasurable, only then arrives that which is. This whole technique is summarized in two principles: 1. Profound reflection, 2. Tremendous serenity. This technique of meditation with its non-thinking puts to work the most central part of the mind, the one that produces the ecstasy. Remember that the central part of the mind is that which is called Buddhata, the essence, the conscience. When the Buddhata awakens, we remain illuminated. We need to awaken the Buddhata, the conscience. The Gnostic student can practice meditation seated in the Western or Oriental style. It is advisable to practice with eyes closed to avoid the distractions of the exterior world. It is also convenient to relax the body carefully, avoiding any muscle remaining in tension. The Buddhata, the essence, is the psychic material, the inner Buddhist principle, the spiritual material or prime matter with which we will give shape to the soul. The Buddhata is the best that we have within and awakens with profound inner meditation. The Buddhata is really the only element that the poor intellectual animal possesses to arrive at the experience of that which we call the truth. The only thing that the intellectual animal can do, unable to incarnate the being due to the fact that he still does not possess the superior existential bodies, is to practice meditation to auto-awaken the Buddhata and know the truth. Mechanical association. Izen sent a mirror to Master Khoisan. Khoisan showed it to his monks and said, "Is this Izen's mirror or my mirror? If you say that it belongs to Izen, how is it that it is in my hands? If you say that it is mine, have I not received it from Izen's hands? Speak, speak, if not I will break it to pieces." The monks were unable to pass between those two opposites and the master broke the mirror into pieces. Ecstasy is impossible as long as the essence is bottled up in the opposites. In the times of Babylon, the Bodhisattva of the most holy Ashyata Shimash, a great avatar, came to the world. The Bodhisattva was not fallen, and like every Bodhisattva, he had his superior existential bodies of the being normally developed. When he reached a responsible age, he arrived at the Vizinian mountain and entered a cavern. The tradition narrates that he carried out 3 tremendous fasts of 40 days, each accompanied by intentional and voluntary suffering. He dedicated the first fast to praying and meditating. The second fast was dedicated to reviewing his entire life and his past lives. The third fast was definitive. It was dedicated to putting an end to the mechanical association of the mind. He did not eat and only drank water, and every half hour he pulled out the hairs from his chest. There are 2 types of mechanical association which are the foundation of the opposites. A. Mechanical association by means of ideas, words, phrases, etc. B. Mechanical association by images, forms, things, persons, etc. An idea associates with another, a word with another, a phrase with another, and the battle of the opposites follows. One person associates with another, the memory of someone comes to his mind. An image associates with another, a form with another, and the battle of the opposites continues. The Bodhisattva of the Avatar Ashyata Shimash suffered the unutterable, and fasting for 40 days, mortifying himself horribly, sunk in profound inner meditation, he achieved the disassociation of the mental mechanics and his mind remained solemnly still and in imposing silence. The result was ecstasy with the incarnation of his real being. Ashyata Shimash carried out a great work in Asia, founding monasteries and establishing rulers with awakened consciousness everywhere. This Bodhisattva was able to incarnate his real being during meditation because he already possessed the superior existential bodies of the being. Those who do not have the superior existential bodies of the being cannot succeed in getting the divinity or the being to operate or incarnate in them, but they are able to liberate the essence so that it will fuse with the being and participate of his ecstasy. In the state of ecstasy, we can study the great mysteries of life and death. We have to study the ritual of life and death until the efficient, the inner self, the being, arrives. It is only in the absence of the I that one can experience the bliss of the being. Only in the absence of the I can ecstasy come. When one achieves the dissolution of the mental mechanics, then comes that which Orientals call the breaking of the bag, eruption of the void. Then there is a shout of joy because the essence, the Buddhata, has escaped from within the battle of the opposites and now participates in the communication of the saints.